us at Fishcake. We have Keiko Hatano, who's our curator for the past 15 years, interviewing her friends Leland and Debra. Current art exhibition is in the studio, based on this book that was just launched by Sachi and Chris. And Keiko's gonna talk a little bit about what they have been doing, what they will be doing, and just sort of organically discuss. But yeah, thank you for all for joining us. Oh, also, we have coffee and baked goods by Arson Brasma on Tuesday. We'll have one interview every Tuesday until the show comes down. So be sure to tap into those and get coffee and listen to the next conversation with the other artists. Right. Anyway, Keiko?
Okay. Okay. First question would be, people often speak of art as a healing therapy. Is your artwork driven or influenced by your strong emotion, opinion, and helped by art?
Well, I'll start. Yes, my art was, I originally embarked on my art as, I'll use the word that some people are reluctant to use, as therapy.
Yeah.
I had injured my back, and I had to stop working as a lawyer because I still have chronic pain, and this was 30-some years ago that I stopped working. And I needed to do something to distract me from the pain, and I'd always been interested in art and exposed to art as a child. And so I started taking art courses at university and painting, and I was a terrible painter, but really awful. But Helen Gilbert, who was on the painting faculty there, was very kind to me, and she said, become an unclassified grad and take courses. And then I happened to take printmaking because it fit into my schedule, and it was love at first crank. And it became a distraction, and I then became a classified grad, and I was informed that you can't, in graduate school, you can't just make art that looks good. It has to mean something. And so I didn't know, I was clueless, and I was really flailing, and then talking to colleagues, my art student colleagues, I realized that the art that I was doing was about my pain. So that became a theme of my early work, in which it consists of branding and branding numbers on paper that reflected the pain scale. Go to a doctor, they ask you to rate your pain on a scale of 1 to 10. And the idea that you had to objectify something so subjective was just something that I was trying to deal with my art. And that helped for a while. And then I got really bored talking about myself. And I'm always a very socially conscious person. And I decided that I read the papers and the blogs every day. I'm aware, for the most part, what's going on in the world. And things really ticked me off, so I decided to venture into trying to do art about issues, and pain on a broader scale. So that was, it took me a while to figure out how to do that, because I didn't want to make agitprop or very pedantic art. I had to make my art in my own voice, and we don't have time for me to track how I got there, but I got there, and the first piece I did was in Jodi Endicott, and a friend of hers, Linda Van Gelderen, opened a gallery in Kailua, and they did a show called War and Peace. So my first piece, my first socially conscious or political piece, was about the Iraq War. And since then, that's where my focus has been. So I think I've talked for enough for now. Take it away.
Well, I wouldn't say it was my experience is very different. I mean, because I I've been doing art since I even knew what that was, and in fact, words are not my first language. And so, but I didn't know I was doing art because I never, and I still don't know what that really means. But you know, I guess it's been survival in a way because I've always been that square peg in the round hole, and always been an outsider. So in that respect, but there's a part of me that really didn't care about being that way, so I just did my own thing. So yeah, my experience is very different as far as doing things therapeutically. I just sometimes I feel good doing it, but not always. I mean, it's always something new, which makes it good and exciting. So whatever is good or bad, and my position is that everything in life is interconnected. So I'm interested in everything. And so whatever expression that comes out of when I'm doing a quote piece of art, that's how it turns out. But yeah, no, I had a very different experience as far as Deborah.
Okay. So do you folks speak to your art? Like, oh, what are you doing? Or you look good or something, as they have a life that you grew into them, you breathe into them.
Well, I liken the work that I do now because it's very obsessive and repetitive and labor intensive
Okay.
but that's the actual making of the art. The conceptual phase,
Yeah.
I sort of liken to the birthing process.
Oh.
And it is incredibly painful. So I don't consciously talk to my art, but I react to what I'm doing, very emotionally, and just um, it is a very difficult process. And living on an island and not having many other artist colleagues that I can talk to about the work. And I love feedback. I love talking about my work. I love talking about other people's work. And the scarcity of that here is very frustrating to me. And so that, that's part of the pain. But I think I'll start worrying if the art talks back to me. Okay. What about you?
Well, again, my experience is very different from Deborah's, and in that I don't necessarily talk to my pieces, but
Yeah.
I'm always having conversations, and it may not even be in English. I mean, like I say,
Mental telepathy, maybe?
no, I mean, it could be like a generational kind of memory of something, or because my life, which is inextricable from my art, is very serendipitous, very fateful, and very chaotic. So it's all of the above, and so whatever the situation is presenting, um, I guess that's how I'm conversing with whatever I'm doing. But the as far as uh, like I tend to do things in a lot of things all at once. So I'm doing modules of stuff or layers of stuff, and a lot of my art can be archaeological, paleontological. It has a lot to do with science and whatever I'm learning, or classifications. And not recently, I've been getting more involved with words because of my friendships with poets, especially W.S. Merwin, and people that are known for their words. And I just did that canoe for the biennial in 2019, and Kealoha, the slam poet, he did a performance piece on that canoe. I don't know what it is, but it's been filmed.
Mm.
But yes, one thing I can express to you is when I was doing the large sculptures at Kapolei, I was hollowing out a boulder that was split in half, and I was carving it out, and I was using a big diamond saw, and as I was cutting the diamond, cutting the rock with the diamond saw, the water hose got pinched off. And if you know you need the water to cool
yeah.
the work.
Yeah.
And so it started spitting out lava.
Whoa.
And it was like so incredible. And yet so it became like how the stone was created in the first place.
That's true.
So that I thought was interesting. But it wasn't something I planned.
So you folks are obviously engaged in even involving danger or pain. You involved with your artwork while you're doing it.
Very, very much so.
Mm.
I just couldn't spend the amount of time or put the amount of effort into what I do if I weren't involved in it.
Yeah.
And recently the issues that I've been dealing with, I take very personally. So
okay, it's a living thing you're creating.
very
actually.
much so. But I have found, and this is going off on a tangent, but this is my club, that my recent work, for the past at least 10 years, if not more, has been about gun violence. And that was literally triggered. And one of these days I'm going to figure out a piece that I can do about how we've incorporated the language of gun violence into our everyday vocabulary. By reading a story in the paper about a 2-year-old in Idaho who was in Walmart with his mother sitting in the cart, and her purse was there and it was open, and he took out her loaded handgun and shot her and killed her. And at the time, my son was still living at home, and all I could think about was this: not only was the mom gone, but that this kid is going to go on with his life with the knowledge at some point that he killed his mother. And so the asynchronicity or it just did not compute. And that funneled me into doing this work. And I've had some museum success and some gallery success in showing the work, and people see my work and they're moved by it. And I was hoping to be able to, at one point, an activist myself, somehow have the work encourage people to take action. But it didn't. And then I also realized I wasn't changing any minds. I was preaching to the choir. People that go to galleries or go to museums, for the most part, will tend to be sympathetic to my point of view. So I decided I'm trying not to use another gun metaphor, put my money where my mouth was. And I got very politically active and involved in lobbying in the state legislature, learning about our state legislature. I had worked on Capitol Hill decades ago in DC, but our legislature is unique in a lot of ways, and I became the state chapter lead for Brady, Hawaii, and Brady is one of the major gun safety groups in the country, and helped work with 2 or 3 other major gun safety groups here and nationally, and we got very good and strong legislation passed.
That's good.
And so it was moving from art to activism, and the artist part of me, how can I make this work art? But maybe it is art. We talked about the definition of art. So that's where I am, and now I can actually spend time, at least for the next few months, working on an actual art piece. But I'll go back and do it because it needs to be done.
I can actually, my life has been very political in many ways, but it's like I say, my life has been very faithful. I was there when Santos was being evicted from Kalama Valley, when the Hawaiian Renaissance was kind of starting, and all these things. I was there, but almost accidentally. I mean, I was curious. I wanted to be part of things, and even to this day, a lot of my pieces are political, but they're also like thinking about solutions. How do we go forward so that if we have environmental destruction, how do we endure as humans, um, and not have a totally dystopian existence. So so a lot of my pieces, even since the canoe is on a lot of people's minds, the canoe is a metaphor for our islands, for our world. You got to get along in a canoe. So if you don't get along, I mean, you know how polarized politics are these days. But if you don't get along in a canoe, either everyone's gonna die, or you ruin yourself. And the other thing about a canoe and the way I did that piece is everything is bound together. Everything is tied together. There's no nails. So that's another metaphor. And there's so many. And even the orientation of that piece is directed either coming or going from Easter Island, which is its own story. So, and even when I put sticks as I was building to the canoe, it made solar impressions in the lawn, and then so you see the wake, awaken. So there's all these things built into that piece that are not really obvious, because I'm not trying to, people can take my work either very simplistically or very deeply, but I put a lot of thought into it. So I'm just hoping that people take that away when they see my work.
Congratulations for your golden hibiscus award.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that was totally unexpected too. But I was just very grateful because, people, I try not to talk about my own work, but when people say that, it self-validation, so that's nice.
I wish you would talk more about your own work.
Yeah.
Because I think, just from your description of the canoe, I wasn't born or raised here, and I just learned a lot from your description of your canoe, and that was the disconnect that I was finding with my work about gun violence. It's people were moved by the presentation and by the aesthetic and by the thought behind it and the numbers behind it, but they didn't have a clue as to what to do with that information. And I think I wish there were a way, when we see a piece like yours, that somewhere there's a QR code that you can flash on, and here you talk about it, here you just basically repeat what you say, because I think it's, at least in these days, I think art has become much more, or socially activist art is very much in vogue in the the larger art world. But I think there's a reason for that, because I think art can communicate important things to people on a level that just the pure intellect doesn't. And you have a lot to communicate. So work with a wordsmith and figure out a way to do it, because you have so much to offer.
Thank you. Yeah, like I said, I don't plan I've never planned anything in life, but I'm open to the opportunities that present themselves as I go through it.
It's like a meant to be.
It's meant to be, and I just always wander into it. People I've met that are very influential in my life, I've never sought them out. Some of them sought me out for whatever reason it was. Even W.S. Merwin, I didn't meet him directly. I was volunteering at Foster Garden, and his wife came up to me and says, "You have to meet my husband." And I didn't even know who he was. And so about a year later, we actually met and we found we were kindred spirits. And then I read some of it. The first poem I read of his was For a Coming Extinction. And then he let me use the biology of art for when I did my one-man show at the then Honolulu Academy of Arts. But yeah, I never know what people think about my art or who I'm. Like I said, I just do what I do, and sometimes I meet interesting people.
Actually, it's very exciting like that because maybe years later, somebody says, "Hey, I saw your work there," and then conversation will begin like you saw that, right? And now you can kind of talk about kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, you remember I told you that my life was very faithful, and I was talking to a friend and talking about these little stories that happened through my life, and I thought everyone's experience was like mine, but one thing I happened to me when I was 5 years old. I lived at Eva Beach, and I lived back in the day when parents would say, "Go out and play and come back when it's dark," and so I just went and explored, and I happened to be at the beach one day, and I saw the tide go out to the breakers, and fish were flopping on the sand, and I went down into these sea caves, and I was having a great time, and found shells, and saw just incredible things, and I thought, wow, this is a great low tide, and then I came in and I went home, and I thought that was really wonderful, but I never thought about it for a long time. My uncle actually lived on that beach for years, and I used to see it every time I went there. The water was always about 3 feet deep, and I said, have you ever seen a low tide where it's just dry? Because that's my memory of when I was a kid. He says no. And then I did a garden for a client that Arthur Erickson was the architect who did the Museum of Anthropology in British Columbia, and I was looking at, I think, well, I may get my facts wrong about Arthur Erickson, but he did this big museum. Anyways, he did one piece in Mokuleia, and I had done the garden, and the client invited me to a dinner, and at that dinner was Dr. Gerard Fryer, who is the head of Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, and so I told him about my experience at Eva Beach, and he said, oh, he knew exactly. It was the 1960 earthquake, the Chilean earthquake, and the tsunami that hit Hilo, that was very devastating in Hilo.
Yeah.
Because the wave oscillations were every 12 minutes in Hilo, but at Eva Beach it was an hour and a half. Huh. So I experienced the drawdown and did all my little exploring as a kid, and then didn't have the wave.
Wow.
So
in
anyway,
the right place at the right time.
Yeah. So anyways, that kind of thing happens throughout my life, Yeah. So anyway.
Okay. So what's the next question? Next question be: do you ever feel empty to create artwork? How do you get out from that feeling? You empty.
Yeah. Yes. And I remember I was a docent up at the Contemporary Museum back when there was a Contemporary Museum here, and one of the advantages of being a docent is when a show of an artist's work was being exhibited before the opening. Usually the artist came in, and most of the time it was a mainland artist, fairly well known or And Susan Rothenberg, who is a painter, and her work was very hot in the 90s, and she was known for her horses. And she later now I think is more known for the fact that she's married to Bruce Nauman, who is a very well known and had a longer period of public acknowledgement as an artist, as a conceptual artist. But she used to talk about going into when she was empty or dry, she would still go into her studio every day and think or work or read or whatever. But even being empty was work time.
Mm.
And so that was a lesson that I've kept up with me. And because my current work is issue driven,
Mm-hmm.
there are so many issues
Mm-hmm.
that I care about.
Sorry.
Um, it's not so much being empty, but if I think about, I really want to move from gun violence, but I can't because it just gets worse and worse and worse.
Mm.
But there are other issues, and then sort of how do I address them, and what can I do in the way I approach things. So that's part of the birthing process I was talking about before. That I'm working on another piece, and it's been a really long process, and I think the baby's about to come. It's just, but it's really been a journey. So yes, yeah. The short answer is yes.
Mm.
Well, I guess I've been empty at times, but there's like Deborah was saying, there's so much, and I've got so much to do, and I've been rejected. I mean, I've done proposals and things get rejected, but I mean, I talk to people all the time, and they don't understand what I'm trying to say sometimes.
Mm.
But that's okay, it's part of life. It's just it's a challenge and it's a learning thing. But you go through it, and you come out the other end, and something is revealed. So as far as that is, it's just a situation.
Mm-hmm.
We get out of it.
Yeah. And I think everybody goes through that. There are, well, I don't think it's just for artists, but particularly artists, because you have to make you maker too as well. Not only just a thinker, but also making things, right?
Oh yeah. And living in your own head too long is not a healthy thing to do.
Yeah. Okay, so this is another question. If you ever change your medium, then what you're doing, what would you do? What kind of thing you do?
I don't know.
Mm. Okay.
I try to, I mean, the older I get,
Mm.
there are things that I used to be able to do
Mm.
that I can't do, so I am, guided by that. And I do work that is, as when I need a break when I finish a piece.
Mm.
I make work that's just, they're collages of test pieces and things. And they don't have any meaning, although they might be autobiographical in terms of, oh, these are marks I made in preparation for another piece. So to that extent, I just for taking a rest and moving on, and dealing with heavy issues most of the time. These are
you need that.
I need that, but I am actually have challenged myself in this last piece where I am kind of incorporating things I've not incorporated before, and that's a challenge. But Um, I, being a printmaker, I don't want to expose myself to chemicals anymore. And although it has become much more environmentally and health-wise, there's conscious in the printmaking world, and so that's good. But physically cranking the press, I can't do. So when I make prints, as I did with those pieces back there, I work with a master printer. But that's expensive. So I have to make pieces that can sell so I can fund my habit.
Yeah.
That doesn't always happen.
Okay.
Well, again, my experience is very different because I work with anything, and I've done everything. I was talking about fish skins, pig intestines,
I've
you know, all
worked
kinds
intestines.
of fruit skins. I mean, because my art sometimes isn't, well, it's dealing with cycles of life. So that's decay, life itself, uh, just conversion, um, seasonality of things, phenology of blooming times and things like that. So that's all. Like I say, everything's interconnected. So whatever I see in front of me can become an art piece. So and I do a lot of burning because it's that's also part. Like forests are burning, and if you see some burnt crosses in here, that's a metaphor for something. So yeah, yeah, it's a
You
different.
never run out the material.
No, because everything is a potential.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But your eyes select, right?
It can. I mean, I was telling another curator that, like I say, words were not my first language, and there may be, at least seven before, before my eyes opened. There's some kind of sensing that you're doing, right? And it could be, smell, taste, hearing, whatever it is, So when I'm just walking around, I find things with my feet that I happen to be looking for. It happens all the time, and yeah, so.
Okay. Okay, so I think this is about last question. Oh, okay, no, sorry, not next, but not last, but can you talk about, but I was gonna ask you, what's the next project, but I think you answered it already. You are working on this project, gun violence, so
Yeah,
you said
That's
that.
and I'm actually thinking about the next, and I mentioned it before, trying to figure out how to use words to make a piece. I mean, when you think about our everyday language, the number, as I said before, gun violence metaphors are just shocking. And so, but as I said before, I don't like to be pedantic. I want to approach it and not just putting words on paper or in a needlepoint or something like that. And so that's potentially the next project, but I don't know.
It'll come together.
Hopefully at
Yeah.
some point.
Yeah. Okay, so then next question would be, okay, so now they talk about AI, artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence can be able to produce writing, or maybe it become more like a 3D works that you put so much energy into it, become that will be yours. But maybe they could produce something like that potentially. What do you feel? Do you arm against that, or do you give it much thoughts or on that issue?
I have no interest. It scares me, and I know that it can do good. And but the potential, as somebody who is very politically aware,
Yeah.
it scares the daylights out of me.
Yeah.
This woman I'm working with on the gun safety legislation, she's just got this mind that constantly, so she was playing around with it, and she was pretty impressed with some of the things she got back, not visually, but with words.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe I'll, now maybe I'll try to play around with, see what they would come up with, see what AI would come up with when I put in words about gun violence. But I, one of the reasons my work is so labor intensive and manually intensive is a rebellion against using any kind of computer generated images. It's never been my interest. So my work is digital, using these digits, not zeros and ones.
Yeah, well, I know about it. I mean, I'm a low tech person, and I'm not opposed to technology. I just don't have a cell phone. I've never had used an ATM. I'm a humanist, so uncontrolled AI is not that. So I know it's there. I know it's coming. How it manifests itself in the world is something I don't know. And good luck to us all. I mean, it's
That's a great way to end this conversation.
How much more? That's
36 minutes in.
Oh, I thought somebody was flashing.
Yeah, I
Okay.
thought so. Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Talk louder.
Oh.
Okay. So I run out the question. You folks talked to me many things that I was wondering about you folks. Do you like this kind of platform? You can speak about your artwork.
What I'm enjoying is
Yeah.
hearing another artist talk about their work. That to me is much more enjoyable than my opportunity to speak about it. And so I'm thinking about how wonderful it is that not only did Sachi and Chris do this book that highlights Hawaii artists' work, but that you're exhibiting it and you're showing it in this space and you're inviting us to talk about it and you're inviting the community to come in and talk to the artists if they want to and have that access. And I am very honored to be part of it, and I hope you're setting a trend.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'm not good at is public speaking. So, and I don't like to talk about myself. But I'm more than happy to converse with people that have questions or, because like I say, I go through my life, however it works out, and I don't plan things. Yeah, but so when things are more structured for me, it's like I can converse in whatever it is that people ask me, because I think I wear a lot of hats and whoever, like some people only know me as a snail researcher.
Oh, you do that too?
Yeah, so I study endemic Hawaiian snails.
Oh,
And I've done that ever since I was 10.
I have to show you my piece about snail's teeth.
Yes,
Teeth?
Radula. See?
They have that?
Radula.
Oh my God!
Yeah,
they
do. They're beautiful, but they're very tiny.
Yeah.
I
There's a
don't
lot
even
of
want to
them.
go close to it.
Well, yeah.
The printmakers has done a couple of exhibitions working with scientists, art side it's called, and the first exhibition we did and collaboration we did is now up at UH, and we were working with UH scientists. And then before COVID hit, we were working with Bishop Museum scientists, and they gave us access to their
Their archive things?
their archives.
Yeah.
And we had a mixer where we could meet the scientists and we could pair up, with who we wanted. And I paired up with a snail researcher. And because I had wanted to do that, I see as I walk in my neighborhood all the snails trails, and I think
Silverish.
silverish, but they're beautiful. They're beautiful, sort of wandering lines.
but that's what comes in your brain, right? That's gonna affect your brain if it's on the lettuce or something.
Oh, you're talking
And
about
if you
yeah,
look at
The
yeah,
ratworm.
yeah,
Yeah,
lungworm.
yeah.
Lungworm.
But that's yeah. So with endemic snails, it's a totally different thing. But I don't want to talk about snails here. But I did want to talk. Because my things are my life is centered on environmental issues and learning about the details of nature.
Mhm.
Because a lot of my things are like man's relationship with nature, and no matter how much we become an urban creature, we're still in nature.
Yep.
And the more we resist nature or fight against it, it's only going to come back at us. So, yeah. So, anyways, I was telling that I have a lot of hats, and so people know me for certain things, and maybe that's it. But this kind of forum, at least it helps um, bring a lot of things together.
Yeah.
You know.
And unleash your
And then-
yeah.
And then you'll understand more when I do an art piece that it's not just a pretty thing.
Mm. That's like myself. I don't like snakes. I mean, not snakes, snails.
Okay.
Just jimmy shibby jibby.
Mm.
Yeah, yes, yes.
So that's good that you challenged that. And
Oh,
you studied that.
It was really fun, and the dialogue between the scientists and the artists, and it was a really interesting exercise. And other, we didn't invent the group, the idea, and there have been other exhibitions about that, but it was really, a way to expose us to different things and challenge, given a subject, I had to do work about a subject that I didn't choose.
And then you open up to that.
Yeah.
Did you show those pieces?
Yeah, they were shown actually they've been up twice at the Bishop Museum.
Mm.
And it still may be online, I'm not sure.
Mm.
Anybody want to contact them about that?
You can call the printmakers, the executive director there.
Who is the executive director now?
So,
Duncan?
no, Duncan, after the move from Linnacona to downtown, Duncan needed a break. It was
I
very,
see.
very intense.
Okay.
So we have this wonderful woman, Denise Carabinas, and she is really energizing the place, doing a lot of community interaction, a lot of workshops and with kids, and really opening kids up. They had a workshop with kids of how to the screen prints and to make signs about water and conserving water and keeping water clean. And then they did a march they marched in Chinatown.
Wow.
And she has a 6-year-old now, so she's very aware of trying to build interact with the community as well as educate kids about what's going on.
I'm glad you brought that up because a lot of times when I'm speaking with adults, their ideas are already so formulated that if you want to affect change, you have to go down to the younger children because they're not so boxed in.
Yeah.
And so I love it when I get to interface with kids, and when I did the canoe, there were 3. The mid-pack preschool helped me, and that was really wonderful.
Oh, that's great.
No, it's really wonderful because they did essential work from stripping leaves off to organizing branches to finding the little material that I really needed to fill out the details of the canoe. And they were fast and they were energized, and that's wonderful. And I did another project with them, another class, to build a imaginarium so that they could imagine. It was basically a play space, but also talking about how to make a structure out of sticks. And yeah, but I do like, because I remember when I was a kid, and things that still influence me I had it back then,
Mm.
you know, and for example, the first memory I have was like I was 3 years old and I was touching a flower and I didn't have a word for that flower, but I remember clear as day what that plant was, and so now I can say the name of that plant.
Mm.
But you know, a lot of things when we experience the world, we don't know what the word is
Mm-hmm.
for whatever we're experiencing. So you know, the visual art, the and whatever media you use, it's all interconnected, and so that's why I say, you know, even though I'm dealing with cultural, social, and other natural histories,
Mm.
it's all intertwined because we're all in this together. So.
And it's really important for kids to be exposed to an artist like you, because one of the things I loved about being a docent at the Contemporary Museum was giving the kids permission to understand that art doesn't, you don't have to be a painter, you don't have to be able to draw. It can be made from anything.
Mm.
And to open their minds,
Mhm.
because, you know, back when there was an art curriculum in public schools, it was all, you know, very, very preordained and you know, cutouts, and you would follow the lines.
Mhm.
And what used to really tick me off was, you know, when there were lines, the girls would color in the lines, and the boys would go like this, and to try to break that habit and open their minds and realize that art can be made from anything.
And interesting you brought that up too, because when I was a kid, I could draw really well. I mean, very, very, very accurate drawings, and now I'm not known for my drawing. Although you know, when you design gardens, you're always drawing.
Mhm.
But yeah, so yeah, I had to almost unlearn drawing to understand that I was creating something else. Well, although I didn't know, like I said, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just going through life doing things on my own. And so, yeah, from doing very representational stuff, even mechanical drawing, I was very good at mechanical drawing. Very tight graphic. You know how when you're doing mechanical drawing, it's very tight.
Yeah.
So I can do that, but you know, I never thought of it as a way to do art. You know.
Did you go to take a either undergraduate or graduate program in architecture or landscape design or anything like that?
No, I mean I backed into landscape design, for example, because I met this guy at Jem's Garden Show. I mean, Jem's Garden Shop. We were looking at the same plant, and we both wanted that plant, and it wasn't for sale, but were imagining in our mind that we'd get it and then we'll divide it. And then he happened to be the landscape architect for the airport and Ali Kalani Hotel, Hilton Hawaiian Village, and I didn't even know that landscape architecture was a profession. But I wasn't even interested in landscape architecture because I can't. You know, when you build a garden, it's like not working with bricks. It's not like you have a plan
Right.
and then that's it. The plan is the beginning, and then it becomes something else.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
they grow.
They grow, and they're not going to listen to the book
Yeah.
unless you cut everything. And I'm not one to make topiary out of every bush or cut a lawn. You know, that's not my thing. It's about how is our relationship with nature. I wanted the urban man to understand what nature is with having the little space that we have in our lots. You know, but all these things, divisions, lawns, walls, you know, it's all part of the social fabric that makes commentary important.
Have you ever experimented with bonsai?
Yes, but reluctantly because it's like bondage. You know? And it's like a lawn. The lawn is a plant that never realizes its final form. You know, it gets to a certain point, you cut it down. It never
Yeah.
finds its final form. Unless it's what we call unmanicured. You know? But then it's not usually called a lawn, it's called a meadow or something else. But Yeah.
We have some questions from the audience.
Okay.
Okay, we squeeze that in. We have like 10 minutes left.
Sure.
Is that okay? No, over there, over there. Get in there. Oh, okay. We gotta hear your question. So sit on that stool and give it a shout out.
Sit on there.
Hi, this is Larson. She's our baker.
I love your earrings. Oh my God.
Thank you.
Yeah, she had a question.
I did have a question. So it was mentioned earlier about how you had to unlearn drawing, which then kind of curated the question in my mind of what other lessons has art helped you unlearn in life to progress further?
Anything can be art. You just have to call it art. But like I say, you know, I don't. I've never really tried to classify anything. And like I said, normally don't talk about my art because everything I do is part of it. You know, I don't. It's like why put something in a frame because everything else around is part of it. I even think about histories. It's not linear, but it's like closely packed spheres, and then it's all meandering. You take little tangents of this and that, and it becomes some kind of storyline. But then what is all the rest? You know, when I used to do these tissue drawings where everything's translucent and layers, and you know, you peel layers of like archaeological, and uh, and then there's I don't know if you know the word palimpsest, but I did a whole show on palimpsest where you know there was a parchment where you'd have a text and there'd be parchment was expensive, so you erase that parchment, but there's always a trace of what was there before, and so there's always these things in my mind about these things, and so as far as unlearning, I think it's just learning and accepting that it's okay, you know.
Well, I was trained as a lawyer, so I had to unlearn certain things, and I still I am constrained by that way of thinking that was literally drilled into me. My first day of law school, I felt like this is what boot camp must feel like in terms of I was told, you know, you're going to unlearn everything you've ever learned about writing and thinking, and we're going to teach you how to write and think like a lawyer. And so it's taken me a while, and it's not completely gone. But,
This is, I think you heard of Senno Rikyu, the tea master of 15th century, 1500 in Japan. Okay, he left many sayings. One of the things is you begin one because you have a lot of training to do. But when you get to 100, you got to go back to one. But I think anybody who learned the skill, it's really hard to go back that because it's in your body,
right.
in your brain. And he's saying that so to negate that and you start from that fresh eyes. But wow, it's hard.
It's very hard.
Yeah.
It's very hard.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm sorry.
No.
Answer your question?
Yeah, I can answer the question. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Larson. We actually have a question from Chris, the writer, too.
Chris the writer.
You can hop in front, it's okay. You can walk in front, Chris.
She wrote that.
I know she did.
Oh,
She's-
she came to you, yeah?
Right. And she's also part of my hui in writing to legislators.
Oh.
Well, I've got a question for each of you. First of all, what's the most difficult piece of work that you've worked on, and why did it succeed, and why was it difficult?
Well, there's difficult has several meanings. I mean, but physically difficult was definitely working on large stone sculptures because that's physically demanding. And I don't have assistants; I just do it all myself.
And creating your own lava flow.
Yeah, and I've moved a lot of things, a lot of the rocks by hand. So because when I met Isamu Noguchi, for example, he saw me doing cut clay sculptures, and he really liked it, and so he said, have you ever thought about doing this in stone? And I said, well, I think about it, but I mean, we don't have a quarry for sculpture around. And so I thought, well, I have to look at that. But yes, as far as physically demanding, definitely stone because it's very, very heavy, very hard. I like the harder rocks better. And there's some pieces back here that are of the really hard basalts. And
You talked about gun violence a lot. What's the other big issue that you feel you'd really like to address?
Oh, the thing that makes me craziest, um, in addition to gun violence, is what's happening to women today, and how men are, presuming that they know better and making, men are basically killing women, with their rules on abortion and doctors afraid to help women who are miscarrying and things like that. And that, but I have no clue how I would translate that into my art. But that is something that gets to me at that visceral level, something that I really have to care about to be able to put the effort in to actually make something about it.
I think that's. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Oh, it's been-
folks. I'm really, I really didn't know certain things that you go through and you too, but I think you were okay because
No,
you
you were-
everything's good.
I'm this pairing to me is, thank you. I mean, it's just wonderful. I really enjoyed it.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yay.